Hey everyone, it's Infinity Gamer here, and in this video I'm going to take you through all of the changes from Season 13 to Season 14. I've gone through both documents line by line, both PDFs from Corvus Belli, not any third-party apps that give mission descriptions. These are the official documents from CB themselves. So let's dive into it. Well, the first change that we notice is obviously the fluff. That progresses quite nicely. It references the Dagama takeover. It notices everything that's happening with the Cerberus uprising kind of thing. We see mentions of Defiance. You will notice in this video I'm going to glance down a lot. I've got a lot of notes because there's actually quite a few changes from season to season, and I want to make sure I get this accurate. But back to the fluff, we see obviously Aleph starting to get a mention, which ties us into Black Wind, which you can just see at the back there. We also see Hak Islam and O12 get a bit of a mention thanks to Saladin basically giving us a lot of the fluff in season 14. Basic rules, we see no major changes in this section of the season 14 PDF, which is Thunderclap, obviously. A lot of the fluff gives us a bit of a background as to why some of the scenarios have changed the way they have, and that becomes a bit clearer as we go through each of the missions. But there's also one significant change to season 14 that we haven't seen historically, and that is something I'm going to mention in a little bit, but is worth hanging around for because I quite like it as a change and it's quite new. When we go through the basic rules, yet things like proxy rules have remained exactly the same. We see no differences as to how tournaments have been scored, which is good because I think we're in a really sweet place with how tournaments are scored in terms of kind of like a defensive bonus and then kind of like an offensive bonus. So if you score more than 5 points versus your enemy, you get a bonus point for that, and if you are within 5 points of your opponent, you get a point for that, so you can lose and still earn points. And I think this system's actually pretty cool, so glad that CB have kept that the same. The only notable change that I've seen in this early stage of the Season 14 documentation is on page 9. That's where we see the diameter of the Civivac token being added into the tokens list. It's 25mm, if anyone needs to know. That wasn't in Season 13's pack for obvious reasons that we'll get to soon. On page 10, this is where we begin to see the Civivac thing take place. So the synchronized civilian rule from season 13 is replaced with a more generic Civivac state. It's a short skill, the wording is slightly changed from what we're used to in terms of synchronizing a civilian. Those changes include clarifying you need to be in silhouette contact or reach it to do the action. You can't Civivac civilians with the Civivac token, which could mean that you can't Civivac a civilian that an allied trooper is evacuating unless you cancel the state, which you can do by declaring this at the start of the order expenditure. This is something that's definitely good to have a read around because it's a bit of a change if you do play missions with Civivac quite frequently. The update appears to remove the hostile civilian situation, which is an interesting one. It's worth a read if you're playing the missions with civilians, as it is a bit wordy. It's still quite it's a decent-ish change. There's also further changes to Civivac that I'll mention when we go through some of the mission-specific changes later on. It's a big enough change from 13 to 14 to warrant reading it if you are playing Civivac rules fairly frequently, because I wouldn't trust what you know from 13 and 12 and then just applying that to the season 14 rules. They're similar enough in intent, it's clear what they're trying to do, but the actual ways that you do it is different enough for season players especially to try and break the habit and look at things in the new way. To this end, the example of how Civivac work gets a bit of padding. In fact, it's almost double the size to what we've seen in season 13 and before that. So again, more padding to explain it to help people understand how the intent is behind that. Kazavac gets no changes. Long service remains as well. Which it still bothers me a little bit, long service, because they're like just saying, oh, and by the way, character works in loads of the cards. I think it's just messy to have it in a page in the tournament rules rather than on the cards. I just wish that they would update the cards. I'm going to mention this later because there's another reason why I think this is actually really showing the age of the cards a little bit more. Basically, let's just update the objective cards to say that character is included as well as veteran, elite and all that nonsense. It would basically help new players understand when you're looking at the card, this is what can achieve it, not, okay, this card plus a page in the ITS. So that's my reasoning as to, part of the reason as to why I think they just need to update the objective cards, basically. Takamotos, that is the big change for Season 14 from Season 13. Every season they kind of make something the focus of it, based on the fluff and things like that. It was bikes last year, and that was due to the Helheim or something. No, that's not even, never mind. So it's basically based on the fluff is why they're doing this. So this is the big change. Bikes are gone and bots are in. That's what we've seen. So forget everything, all the benefits bikes had, all those bikes that you bought for Season 13 to do Motorized Bounty Hunter because your faction really loved bikes. Not as hot this time, but still worth keeping. Definitely don't throw your toys out the pram. So the new rule here is that remotes with both Forward Observer and the Repeater skills and equipment gain marksmanship and tactical awareness. So tactical awareness is an extra order just for that unit, and marksmanship means you ignore cover when you're shooting at something. Marksmanship is useful, but when you look at the units that gain this, most of them, as far as I can see, have combi rifles, which doesn't sound super interesting, but a combi rifle in the right range, negating cover, burst 3, could actually be fairly useful. I don't think this is going to be like bikes, where everyone rushes to fill their lists and their factions with remotes that they didn't have in order to get that, but there is a potential change elsewhere in some missions that might mean that remotes in general see a bit more presence on lists than they did before. They also get ECM Hacker -3, but only if they don't have ECM Hacker equipment, so it doesn't stack, worth noting there. Also, if you have access to the Tractor Mall because you're Ariadne, it gets a new profile with Forward Observer and Repeater, so that Ariadne basically get the same toys that every other faction has access to. Bikes are out, bots are in. The next new bit for the Season 14 changes from Season 13 comes on page 13, which is the direct action section. I'm going to talk more to this because I'm going to go through all of the missions and what's changed as part of this video. And at the end, we're going to talk about the direct action missions, which are 4 new missions that Corvus Belli have basically launched that are supposed to be simpler and are more of like an entry into ITS gaming. Fundamentally, they have no terrain rules, they don't use the classified deck, they don't have HVTs. You basically just focus on the mission and that's kind of it, but they're not like super stripped back, they're still proper missions, and again I'm going to talk about these at the end of the video. But yeah, they're basically supposed to be an intro into ITS. Then we see some other significant changes. The classified section, which is the main one of the reasons again why I just feel like you need to just update the classified deck, because every PDF has this where it's like change the wording in this classified to this, change the wording in this classified to that, and it's just like just bring out new classified objectives with the proper wording. We'd all be fine. So the first one, back in Season 13, the Predator classified reverted to the language on the card, which meant that coup de grace counted towards achieving Predator. However, in Season 14, we see that line that was in Season 12 added back in that basically says coup de grace doesn't count towards achieving Predator. Again, just update the card. It's clear that you prefer for coup de grace to not count. Just update the card and remove that line entirely. Season 14, we see the rest of the classifieds stay the same. They haven't been updated since Season 10. Now that M4's out, because a lot of the changes that are actually written in this document are actually just updating the wording from what was happening in N3 and probably earlier to what M4 has brought out, things like in silhouette contact, within zone of control, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of it is just updating the wording to N4. I feel like we can have objective cards updated now. It was one of my first questions when I actually started playing Infinity was, I found these Season 10 classified objectives, they seem really old. Are they still relevant? Yes, those are still the ones we're playing with, and we probably need some new ones. Missions! Let's get into those. What has changed fundamentally in each one of the missions? We'll go through every single one of them, even though one doesn't have any change. We have the same missions from Season 13 to Season 14. That's one of the biggest non-changes that we've seen from Season 13, because from Season 12 to Season 13 we did have 3 missions swapped out and new missions come in. They haven't bothered with Season 14. These are all the same, but there are slight modifications to most of them, at least in some regards. So Acquisition's the first one. There's 2 changes to this. Nothing to scoring, which is always interesting to see. Bike Recon from Season 13 has been replaced by Corsair, which means you get a free Bashi Bazuik. That's not how it's pronounced, but I'm going to roll with that for the rest of this video. Bashi, you get a free Bashi. Then you get a new terrain rule, which is low gravity. And low gravity in Season 14 means that terrain total and terrain 0G gains super jump, which, you know, all O12 players should be very happy about because you've got a lot of 0G in your lists. Moving on to Annihilation, we see 2 changes there as well. Nothing in regards to changing of the points. Trust me, there are some points changes coming in this video to different missions, but not to Annihilation. We see the Blizzard rule from Season 13 replaced with low gravity, which means terrain total and terrain 0G get super jump. That's it for Annihilation. Oh, no, sorry. Bike Recon is replaced by an F13 defensive turret. in Season 14, which is quite good for Annihilation, I think. I think that defensive turret will actually change how people play it a little bit, but not massively. Get to Biotechvore, had a game of this last week. I do quite like Biotechvore. I think it's incredibly underrated and should be in more tournaments because it forces people to play very differently because you've got to move everything up, which otherwise it dies to the plague. Which I think is good because a lot of list building can focus on having castles and cores that don't really move. Biotechvore forces that to be more mobile. There's only one change to Biotechvore in Season 14, and that is that the Intelcom card rule is swapped for an Evo Hacker bonus. And the Evo Hacker bonus adds an extra order to the order pool just for that Evo Hacker. So again, that's where we might start to see remotes come in. You know, we've got the Takamoto rule, which generally applies to some remotes, but then Evo Hackers getting this one. Sometimes you mostly see those in remotes, so you might see one or two appear. But I don't think this is enough to start putting Evo Hackers in your list. Getting one extra order is nice, and if you're order starved and if you're umming and ahhing about what you're going to take, maybe, but I don't think it's enough to do that, especially in a mission like Biotechvore where you get penalties for deploying outside of your deployment zone. So it's -3 if it's in your half, but outside your deployment zone. It's -6 if you're trying to do it in the enemy half. So those are the sorts of things that you need to think about, you know, and Evo hacking is mostly good for helping things AD drop or boosting heavy infantry and stuff like that. So yeah, interesting one for Biotechvore. Capture and protect. There's no point changes here, but the pickup beacon action loses a requirement. So what it said is the trooper needs to be in silhouette contact with a model in a null state that has an enemy beacon. That's been removed. Now, I don't think this represents a massive change, as I believe, because you can still pick up the beacon that a null friendly trooper has or that anything else has, but you need to be in silhouette contact with the beacon and not the trooper, which means if you think about it, you know, you could have had something with a really big base grabbing the beacon, and then you just had to touch its base, and then you could transfer it kind of over the base to you. My belief is that this removing of that bullet point is to stop that from happening, and basically you have to now get in contact with the beacon to pick it up, which again kind of makes sense, you know. A null character can't pass you something over its body, so you probably should have to go around it. So yeah, that's a text change from one season to another. Have a read of it if you're unsure, and if you want to be sure, but yeah, that's fundamentally it's removing a bullet point. You get two new scenario rules this time, so we get decompression zones and master breacher. So the decompression zone, each player before deployment places 2 circular templates on the board. Those circular template areas then become saturation zones, which means you -1 burst. Now remember, if you're splitting your burst, it's -1 off each of your split bursts. I'm using the hand actions because my words aren't working, but down to a minimum of 1, so you can't get below 1. So think about that if you're splitting your bursts through a saturation zone. They also get 0G, which is again good for train total. It's good for the master breacher actually. So when we get to that, 0G terrain is difficult and enables troopers with terrain 0 or terrain total to walk normally through that. Troopers without that basically have to stop on the edge of the circular template at the end of that, regardless of how much movement they have left on their order, and then they would have to spend a new order to move through that circular template, but at a -1 for that. So that's worth thinking about. And the master breacher, you allocate one of your troopers with several caveats. You know, can't be a camo token, can't be a remote. There's some other stuff as well, and they get 0G and decharges. So that's quite useful. So choose your master breacher wisely because you might want them to be going through these saturations, these decompression zones. Next up we have countermeasures. This is another one that doesn't get any points changes, but we do see sec debt. So the security detachment gets added, replacing the Blizzard special rule that was in Season 13 for countermeasures. So the sec debt, you basically get a free extra unit that is a CSU. Very similar to when you were used to the motorized bounty hunter in Season 13, where you just get to add a bike unit. This is exactly the same process, but it's a CSU unit. Doesn't add to your SWC, doesn't increase your points, doesn't count towards your capacity for a maximum of 10 models in a command group thing. You also get the defensive turret is replaced from Season 13 with an Evo Hacker bonus if you're tempted to take that. Cryogenics, that's the new mission actually for Season 13. I said there were no new missions, and then I'm realizing through this list that actually Cryogenics is the new one. So actually in Season 14 we have more missions available than we had in Season 13 because of the 4 new ones at the end, the direct action ones, and now Cryogenics. It's a new mission. There's a lot in this mission, quite a lot of effects, bonuses, all that sort of stuff. So definitely have a read and have a play of it. It's always quite nice when a new mission comes to the table. I do love new missions, and I wish that CB did more of this each season. And it looks like a cool mission on paper, so I'm actually quite excited to give this a go, but I haven't had a chance to just yet. If you have, drop in the comments what you think of it. Is it a good one to play? Does it have any flaws? What do you like, dislike about it? I'm really interested to hear from anyone that has played Cryogenics, and give us your thoughts on how it actually plays rather than just how it looks on paper. Decapitation, one of my favourite missions in all of Corvus Belli's ITS missions. This has the same points, however there is an additional bit of info clarifying lieutenant kills, probably just to get around all the questions that people have around what if it's in this state then and that state then. So it says each time a lieutenant is in a null state at the end of the current turn, or entered a null state, it will be considered killed for the main objectives, even though the trooper that was the lieutenant is no longer in a null state. To be honest, I don't know that this makes things a lot clearer than it was before. We also get an additional paragraph under killing that says basically the same thing. A lieutenant is considered killed if they were a lieutenant at any time during the game, and they either entered the dead state or in a null state at the end of the game. I mean, on paper, it basically leads me to believe that if that unit was designated the lieutenant died, it doesn't matter whether you've resurrected it, it doesn't matter what's happened, it did die at some stage, so it counts as a lieutenant kill, so there's no way of kind of mitigating someone's scoring points from killing your lieutenant. Is it too confusing? Have Corvus Belli missed the mark slightly in explaining how this is supposed to be played? I don't know. I've always thought Decap's fairly straightforward, maybe that's just me. Both the Blizzard and F13 rules from Season 13 are replaced, and this time we get the Master Breacher, which I've already explained, and we get No Gravity, which No Gravity means Terrain Total, Terrain 0G, and Super Jump units all get +1 inch move to their first movement value. So definitely keep that in mind. So that's where you might see some more Super Jump units, which are already quite powerful as they are, let alone giving them an extra 1 inch move. So yeah, interesting to see that come through. Firefight gets a similar new paragraph to Decap about killing lieutenants to clarify things further. Blizzard is replaced by Low Gravity. Again, that's more of a fluff change than anything in particular. And Corsair is added as a free unit, which is actually quite a significant change from last season because you didn't really get anything free in Firefight last time. But the Corsair is quite nice because it's a unit that can move around and do stuff. Frostbite, finally seeing some points changes on the board from Season 13 to Season 14. So killing more army points drops from 3 in Season 13 to 2 in Season 14. Dominating the exclusion zone is still 3 points. Having as many active heaters as the enemy is 2 points. Having more active heaters is 3 points. And you have 2 classifieds down from 3. So it's more of a swing to playing the mission and not just killing lots and playing your classifieds, which I quite like. There's a small text change to Kill a Cold Explainer, which is just fluff, like it doesn't change how things are actually done. However, there is a little bit of a change later, which I will talk about. In this scenario, the Snow Ops exception from Season 13 is changed to Master Breacher, which is very similar to Snow Ops in real terms. And the automated defense systems get a slight rewording to drop the CC attack bit, meaning it should hopefully clarify things for people who were like, what if I use guard and decharges? What if I do this? What if I do that? So it's clarifying that it's not just CC attacks, it's kind of any attack, which obviously means guard. I mean, again, I always thought guard as a CC attack. You can only use CC attacks against these heaters. The automated defense system gets a slight rewording to drop the CC attack as well. CC weapons have also lost their mention to also reduce questions under the damage and destroy section. Connecting a console short skill gets an additional effect. Basically, you can't activate more than 1 heating unit per console. And Blizzard changes to decompression zones with 0G. Bike Recon changes to Master Breacher, and this becomes your Snow Ops unit. So that's some of the changes. Again, it's more of a fluff change to go from being super cold with Frostbite to being super cold because of in space, like 0G kind of stuff, I guess, which fits the Dagama takeover and Raven Eye stuff that's going on. Frontline, no points changes. Antarctic from Season 13 has dropped. F13 turret gets added. Decompression also gets added. This is quite a big change as Antarctic affects the whole table and certain units, while decompression zones are only circular templates can be avoided. So I do think people's list building might change slightly to deal with this. I think this does impact list building a little bit more. Anything that's table wide, I feel you do kind of lean into a bit more with list building. Anything that's just circular templates, you don't lean into as much because you kind of think you might be able to avoid some of those zones. So yeah, interesting. You might even go for higher burst stuff or lower burst stuff to avoid those -1 saturation zone effects. Highly classified, points get a change here. The text also changes to clarify scoring for main objectives. Again, probably just making things easier. So scoring more main classifieds drops from 4 in Season 13 to 3. The same number remains at 2. Still get 1 for each main classified achieved. And the 1 secondary objective increases in value from 2 in Season 13 to 3. I think that's actually quite a good change and quite a big one. Because you can do secure HVT on the secondary objective, but you can't do it on any of your main objectives. So the fact that that's now 3 means that it's actually quite viable for you to pick a bit of a dummy secondary objective and then just use that as the secure HVT one for a relatively easy 3 points, which is good. The defensive turret in Season 13 is replaced with the Master Breacher rule, which is quite useful, and then Antarctic territory is replaced with a no gravity zone, which is like for like because those are both board-wide effects. Looting and Sabotage. The AC2s get the same text change as the heater units in Frostbite to try and clarify CC attacks on them and things like that, so that's like for like. The damage and destroy AC2 changes the wording from or with decharges to or by placing decharges. Again, I think that's basically to clarify a lot of the arguments that we saw online around, oh, you can't do this because of that, you can do that because of that. I think they're basically just trying to get away from the confusion that sparks these massive Facebook threads that are mostly going around in circles. Antarctic territory switches to a low gravity area. Interestingly, the Panoplies get a change in this mission. I actually really like this. I think this changes the game quite a lot too, which is great. So when you extract something from the Panoply, you can either choose to roll on the Panoply chart, which is what Season 13 had, or you can just gain decharges from it, which is pretty cool because it means that you can have a unit that is going up to get the AC2s, but doesn't have decharges, and you know you can get them. So you can actually play that into your mission. Give a unit that's quite fast or something, the decharges by rolling on the Panoply chart, and then going up and doing the attack. I think it's pretty cool actually that you can just get decharges from the Panoply boards. Looting and Sabotage also gets the Corsair rule, so that's now a new free unit as well. Mindwipe. Points stay the same with this one too. There's a wording change to bullet point 3 of the activate console short skill here. Looks like they've just streamlined the wording but not really changed the intent, so that's good. The second paragraph of the data erasure element also has been reworded, but again looks more like streamlining of the text rather than changing of intent. The data erasure short skill gains a second bullet point in the requirements, clarifying that only the data erasure hacker can attack the server, which again I think was obvious to everyone like playing basically as intended, in the spirit of the mission, but obviously for anyone who's like rules as written, that maybe wasn't clear enough. So yeah, only the data erasure can attack it. And we get a new attack value for the data erasure attack in Season 14, which wasn't in Season 13 at all. Again, probably clarifying this is what you're attacking, these are the values that you're using. It's a very flat attack, so that's good as well, just clarifies everything a lot more. Panic Room, no changes to points, update to the second paragraph of Confused Deployment. Interestingly, specifies that units with combat jump PH 14, that's an ability, because it means you're combat jumping on PH 14, standard, drops that to PH 11 if deploying outside their deployment zone. I looked through a couple of models to see what had this. Liao Zhang from Yujing has this. I don't know if that means that you would drop to PH 8 if you were trying to do it in the enemy half. I'd assume no, but I'm not sure on that because I also don't use units that have that very often. So yeah, or whether they stay at 11 even if they're doing what would typically do a -6 impact, so not sure on that. I wonder if that applies to net rods as well. So they have a PH 12 flat for combat jump. Does that mean that kind of drops to 9 standard, or do they just do 12, in which case a net rod is actually dropping better than Liao Zheng? So again, I'm probably reading too much into it, but I just didn't see a definitive answer to make that clear for me. So, yeah, not sure really there. The map also supports... interestingly, you cannot deploy in the panic room now. In Season 13, you could. In Season 14, you now can't, which I think is what it was in Season 12. And that's also then confirmed on the maps in the PDFs from Corvus Belli, because in the Season 13 one, it doesn't have an exclusion zone in the panic room, but in Season 14, we see that added. Fortunately, there's a little spelling mistake on that exclusion zone, but we know what they mean. We also get the Evo Hacker bonus for this mission. Power Pack, no changes to points. Bike Recon gets switched out from Season 13 with SecDet in Season 14, which is a free CSU that I've mentioned before, which makes it a like for like, it's free unit kind of idea. We do get an F13 defensive turret this season, which I think is pretty cool. Then Quadrant Control, we've got no changes to points. Antarctic territory gets swapped for decompression zones. Always find it interesting when a board-wide buff is swapped for like a template buff. We'll see that. This is the second time we've seen that in Season 14. It's interesting because it changes, to me, list building and playstyle quite a bit. The F13 turret gets changed for SecDet CSU. Nice to have a free model. And obviously, I think the SecDet, from what I said earlier, but now my brain is going, I think that gets 0G, so it's probably good in those decompression zones. I've even got that here. The fact that it comes with 0G in a mission where 0G gets added is actually pretty cool. So yeah, there you go. You probably might use this CSU more aggressively than you think, because it doesn't get mitigated by the terrain. Rescue, no changes to points, but the wording is adjusted to meet the new updated Civivac states that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Same with paragraph 6 of the civilian section, wording changes from synchronizing civilians to Civivac, which is a bit easier. 2 new conditions for this mission in Season 14. We get no gravity zones, which is the map-wide effect, and we get Corsair, which is the free Bashi. So there you go, a free unit in Rescue to help you rescue all those civilians. Supplies, no points changes. Supplies is always a surprise to play because it is a lot more fun than I think it is. There's no points changes there. Pick up supply box, short skill loses 1 requirement. Basically the same as the other mission where you lose being in silhouette contact with a unit that has dropped it or passing it on with the model in a null state. You basically have to be touching the box in order to grab it, which again kind of makes perfect sense. In addition to the Intelcom card from Season 13, we get SecDet CSU for free and a low gravity area, so some big changes to this one actually. Again, a favourite mission of mine, and I appreciate this is actually a fairly long video, but I am trying to get through every single change from Season 13 to Season 14 as quickly as possible and in one video so that you can just get all of the information possible without having to sit through the 2 PDFs and compare line by line like I have. So let's jump to Supremacy. You get 1 new point scoring element here in this mission. You now get a point for dominating the same number of quadrants as your enemy at the end of the round, which I think is a really nice addition to this mission, because you get to the point in a really close game where you don't achieve anything because it's close. You know, you're both battling over objectives. I think that's pretty good. I do find that Supremacy is a difficult one anyway, because going second, I feel you do get a good advantage to try and like swing things in your way, and it is a very swingy game. You know, you can have 1 more quadrant than your enemy and you get a whole chunk of points, but this might go some way to addressing that balance. We lose the defensive turret in Season 14, and this season the mission gains the no gravity battle-wide effect and also SecDet unit. So it is actually a fairly substantial change from Season 13 to Season 14, at least like in terms of how you might approach that and using these additional rules. Armory, no points changes here. We do lose Antarctic territory and there's no map-wide bonus to replace it. Instead, we see the Evo Hacker bonus and the F13 defensive turret come into play, which is quite interesting. Unmasking sees 0 changes from Season 13 to Season 14, which I'm fine with because Unmasking is actually a pretty good mission as it is. That's it for the standard Season 14 missions. So we had the 1 new one, and almost all of the missions got some form of change, apart from Unmasking. Now we head into the 4 additional bonus missions for Season 14, called Direct Action missions. These are completely new for Season 14. They are simpler missions, in a way, based on missions that we know and love. A lot of them use a key ops idea. You basically declare one of your deployed troopers with a few restrictions, very similar to Master Breacher if you're more familiar with that. This unit gains dodge +3 and a tactical awareness order. So that's what we get here in these 4 missions. The first one of those 4 missions is Battleground. So this is based on Frontline with no HVTs and no classifieds, which you'll notice across all of these 4. There's no HVTs, no classifieds in any of them, which is a big departure from Frontline as that uses 4 classified cards. So to say it's related to Frontline, you're actually stripping out a core mechanic of Frontline in Battleground. It looks very fun. We'll be playing this as part of my local group's assessment, but yeah, like, it looks nice on paper, relatively streamlined, straightforward. Cutthroat, based on Decap, but again, looks fun, could see this in some tournaments, and the reason why I can see it in some tournaments, because the tournament I'm hosting towards the tail end of this month, Operation Paradiso, we've had Decap, which was originally on the list, swapped out for Cutthroat, because again, just kind of wanted it to be as streamlined as possible and as simple as possible. So yeah, Cutthroat is making it into an ITS tournament. Superiority, similar in name. This is Supremacy's sibling. Key Ops is here as well, but you also get the SecDet. This is a little odd, as it comes with a terrain bonus, but these direct action missions avoid these buffs, so you wouldn't necessarily, like SecDet, sorry, gets like a terrain bonus, but so weird that they chose, I found it weird that they chose SecDet as the bonus, because I mean it's good to get a free unit anyway, but one of the reasons I see SecDet being good in most lists is that you're going to use that in the terrain that gets added or the territories that get added. Uplink Center, based on Acquisition. This is the closest to the original mission out of the 4. There are only 2 differences to this and the Season 14 version of Acquisition, and that's basically, you know, lacking HVTs and classifieds. Obviously there's no low gravity rule because these are all streamlined versions, and the Active Lieutenant rule, which is where we get the replacement points for having no classified cards. So that's it. That is all of the changes from Season 13 to Season 14 in as quick a video as I can physically do, whilst also trying to go into some depth on what the changes are and why they're important and what they do for the mission. Hopefully this has been helpful to you if you are looking to start play some Season 14 missions but are very familiar with Season 13, or if you're coming into the game fresh and you just want to know what the key changes are from like 12 and 13 and what you're used to. I do wish, CB are incredibly busy people, but if they ever do get a chance to watch one of my silly videos, then please, 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 I implore you, consider changing the classified objectives deck. Now, I don't think we need, I know there's a lot of disagreement around changing the classified objectives deck. I certainly don't think we need to get into a Games Workshop mentality where every single season we get a new deck of classified objectives because they are fundamentally the same missions. Which gets me onto my other point. But I do think we're now at the point where there have been enough changes from Season 10 to now Season 14 where we could just have a classified objective deck that at least changes the wording to update to N4 and all of that sort of stuff. But I actually think below the surface of that, so if you just release a new classified deck and that survives for the next couple of years, I'll be happy with that. I'll definitely buy it, because I can't think whilst doing missions of something that's on a rulebook as well as something that's on the card. However, I also wish there was something else that Corvus Belli would do. I wish, and drop in the comments below as to whether you agree with this or not, that each season there were completely new missions. I know we all have our favourites, supplies, unmasking, just some of mine, but I also like the idea that the season reflects the fluff and that the missions reflect the tactical or strategic level stuff that's going on in the fluff itself. So new missions to change the type of battles that are happening. I do think Corvus Belli have enough missions available in their roster for us to get 12 or 13 new ones every year, and with new rules and everything like that, as opposed to just keeping the core 12 or 13 that are in there and then just adding a fluffy terrain rule and a fluffy free unit rule. I think it would be nice for us to get completely new missions every single season. Again, please jump in the comments if you agree with that or not. I'm very happy to hear the other side of the perspective on there. And then also tying that in with the classified objectives, I do, less importantly, think that they might need updating as well. I like the idea that there's kind of like standard mode and extreme mode, although I've never ever played the extreme mode. what I would like, almost, and again, if this doesn't break the point scoring system too much, is for there to be two objectives on each of those cards. One's like super easy to do and only gives you like 1 point, and then one's a bit harder to do and gives you 2 points. And I think that would push some people, if they're behind on the mission, because you get some really swingy missions here. Like I said, Quadrant Control, things like Supremacy. It can really go against you if someone's dominating you, because they can get 3 points for dominating a quadrant at the end of the round because they went second. I think if we change the objective cards a little bit so that you can get 2 points quite easily for almost all of them, it might just help people go, okay, well, I can't necessarily play the mission, but I can play my objective in my card, but also try and focus on the mission. That's just me. I don't think that that's as big a need as us just getting an updated Season 15 classified deck. That's not as important to me as a suggestion to each season change the missions fundamentally. Those two things I think would be really exciting and make these new season launches even better than they are at the moment. Again, please jump in the comments, let me know if you agree, disagree, if you've got any thoughts around the missions for Season 14, if you've got any thoughts about the classified deck, if you've got any questions or concerns around some of the wording that's in these missions at all. Again, if you wish Corvus Belli would do something different for the missions, I'm happy to hear your thoughts here. I'm always keen to hear from you, so please jump in the comments and let me know what you're thinking. I'm excited to start playing Season 14, and I hope you are too. Thank you very much for watching this video, I always appreciate it, and I will be back soon with another one.